All right, and welcome back to AVR120. This will be our third session. This video will predominantly be on C# statements. So a C# statement is a piece of code that controls the logic of a program and its flow. Generally, it checks if a condition is true, or it can also check if a condition is false, and if so, it will do that code. So the first statement we're going to be talking about is an if statement. So the if statement is the one of the most basic statements in the language. It essentially uses the if keyword, and then whatever is within these parentheses, it's gonna the conditions within these parentheses. It'll check that condition, and then it will execute the code inside of these brackets. Okay, if that condition is true. If we go ahead and look here too, we can see kind of a flow diagram as well. If this is the starting point of the application, it'll kind of move down. It'll hit this if check here, and if the condition is true, it runs the conditional code. Otherwise, if it is false, it'll just continue on with the application, the execution of the application. So this is an example of an if statement. Basically, you'll see the condition here, right? We will write if the variable player health is greater than or equal to 50, then we will print this text, which is the player's name variable, and is looking healthy. So this code will run. So if we go back to our program now, we can go ahead and implement that code. So we have the player health variable already set up from the last video, and we'll say if player health is greater than or equal to 50, we can say console.writeLine to print out some text to the screen, and then we can take the adventurer's name variable, which holds the input from the user for their name, and we can say is looking healthy. We'll go ahead and save that. And I'm actually going to change this variable to like 60. All right, and if we run this now, it'll ask for my name. I'll say Richard. All right, it prints off my health, kind of does the increment, decrement, the plus equals operator, oops, I forgot to put a console.read line, so I need to do console.readline here to pause the execution of the program. Go ahead and do that now. And it says I'm looking healthy. So we can see that this section of the code ran there. Okay. So going back to the slides, um, these are some of the statement operators which will be used in the if statements. So you can actually check multiple conditions. Not you don't have to just check one. And so to check multiple conditions, you'll need to use these statement operators to kind of put them together and compare them and check them in different ways. So this ampersand here, the and operator, it checks if there was, let's say, is player health greater than 60 on the left-hand side and player health is not equal to 0, then this would be true, and it would run the code inside of that bracket. This is the OR operator. Something to note about OR is that it only just checks the one side, and this is true. It's just going to run the code underneath these parentheses. If it's not, it'll go to the next statement, check that. If that's true, it'll run it. If it, obviously, if it doesn't check either of those, if either of those are false, it'll just skip past that code in those brackets there. So you can use it to kind of like shortcut if you just want to make a statement run quicker, or just check one thing, and if that one thing is true, then run it. This is a good way to do it. But basically, this is in normal language, or, right? This or this is true. Okay. This and this needs to be true for the text to run. This operator is the not equals to operator, the exclamation point and the equal point. And so basically, actually, sorry, it's just the exclamation point here. So um, you can write it such as this, right? So you could say if uh, these are not true, okay? This exclamation point in front of that is saying essentially that um, well, better, let's just ignore this for now. If you just had the exclamation point and the parentheses in like condition A, that's basically saying if condition A is not true, then run the code. Otherwise, if condition A is true, then the code beneath this in the brackets would run. So we'll do a we'll do an example of this in a second here, but I want to do it in conjunction with an if-else statement. So an if-else statement is formatted as such, okay? And basically, it will say if this condition is true, then runs the code just like an if statement, but it also has an else portion, and this is like the default. So if this condition is not true, then run the code in here, okay? Instead of just continuing on with the application, okay? So if we're looking at this in like a flow diagram perspective, the main program starts here, goes, checks the condition. If the condition is true, it runs the code inside these statements, right? So it goes to that. If it's false, it runs the else code. So it runs the code inside of this statement here, okay? Instead of just jumping out of this whole if statement and continuing on with the program. So in the if statement up here, right, it is checking the condition, running the code. If the condition is true, if it's false, it just continues on with the execution of the program. And with a program like we have, it's going to run in sequential order, right? So it'll get to this, it will check, do this check, and then if it's not true, it just will jump down to the rest of the program and continue in the order that we wrote it. But with the if else statement, it's going to check the condition, run the code. If that's not true, it's going to then run this code. Okay, so this code essentially will always be run as long as this condition is not true. So we can see the example of this here. Um, so we have our if statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to get, just like we kind of got the user's name input, we're going to get the user's answer text input. All right. And if we're going to do all these checks on it. So we're going to indicate that we want the user to input it either as a lowercase y, or, so this is the or operator, a uppercase y, okay, or the lowercase yes or an uppercase yes, all right? And then we're comparing this. This is the comparison operator. So this is the kind of the first time we're using that. It's basically saying whatever this variable is, it's comparing it to this variable. It's not saying that it's equal to this variable. It's saying, okay, does the user answer, is this an approximation of what the user's answer is? If it is a lowercase y, okay, good. Then I'll run that code. So if this is true, by the way, it'll immediately run the code down here. Okay, it doesn't have to check the rest of these statements. Okay, but it will also do this and what's after this and, because basically the way the and operator works is if it's in here, it needs to, yeah, one of these needs to be true, and this also needs to be true, okay, for the code to run. So basically this is saying if the user inputs a lowercase y, capital Y, a lowercase yes, a capital yes, and the user's answer is not equal to nothing, okay, so they don't just press enter and type nothing in there, we run that code, okay? Otherwise, if none of the if something is not true, so if they don't type in any of these, okay, and or they make it so they don't type in anything at all and they just press enter, it's going to run the code inside of this else statement. Okay. All right. So if we kind of go back to the code here, and we can go ahead and get these users input here. Okay. So we'll do it at the bottom, and we will say you know what? Let's. I'm sorry. Let's do it at the top here. We'll do right after we get the adventurer's name, and we'll say console.writeLine. We can use the adventurer name variable, and then concatenate it, and say, would you like to begin your adventure? And we can create a string type variable, okay, and we'll call it adventure start, and we'll set it equal to console.readLine, which is the user's input. Okay. And then what we can go ahead and do is we can run a check. We'll set up that check. So we'll say if adventurer, that's not what I wanted to do. Adventurer start is a lowercase y, or, and I'm actually just going to copy this to make this quicker. A capital Y, or adventurer start is equal to yes, or or it's equal to yes with a capital, and it actually, maybe we'll do an extra one, right? We can do we can actually, you know what, we'll just leave it for now, sorry. And then we'll say and adventurer start is not equal to null. All right, and null means that nothing. Then run the code. Your adventure begins now. And we'll do a console dot read line to pause it. Otherwise, we'll put an else. We can say console.writeLine. Well, that's not very adventurous. So if we run this now, we'll see that, would you like to begin your adventure? And I will type in, let's just do yes. Your adventure begins now, okay? And so if I run this again, all right, lowercase y, my adventure begins now, right? So we can see that those cases work there. If I type in nothing, you'll see that this code runs, all right? Same thing if I type in kind of gibberish, right? It'll also run that. Something to note here is we could probably lower or lessen this kind of long, ugly line here by using a built-in C# method that is located on the string data that the string data type has access to. So when we set string adventure start equals to console.readline, if we actually just did this to lower, okay, so this returns a copy of the string converted to lowercase. So it's like a helper kind of method, which we'll learn more about methods here in a moment. But essentially, this will allow make it so that whatever they type in is set to a lowercase letter. So it sets a lowercase. So we would never have this instance here, and we would never have this instance here. So we can actually just like go ahead and delete this because those are capital, and it's always only ever going to be a lowercase word. Okay, so this is another variation of that, an if else. So same exact concept, except it's going to check this condition. If it's not true, it'll just go down the list. So check this condition, condition isn't true. Uh, check this condition, condition. If the condition isn't true, it'll just jump down to the else. If this condition is true, then it'll run the code and it will continue on with execution of the program. So if we look at the flow, if we look at the flow chart here, main program checks the condition. If the condition is true, runs the if code, and then it goes back to the main execution of the program, and it does that for each of those. So the else if condition does that, runs the else if code, back to the main program, else code, back to the main program. So we're going to do this for player health here. So if we can see here if player health is greater than or equal to 50, we already wrote that. And then we can write an else if, player's health is less than or equal to 25. We can say his health is waning. Otherwise, it appears normal, right? So if we go ahead and go back to the code here, we can go down here back to this statement, and we can turn it into an else if by putting an else if else if else statement by putting an else if here, and then checking the player health, and if it's less than or equal to 25, okay, we'll go ahead and write the console.writeLine, adventure name, health, HP hit. Yeah, we'll just put HP is waning. And we'll do console.readline there. Otherwise, we could say else. And so again, we're kind of seeing here adventure name. Basically, if it's going to check to see if it's above 60, then it'll say it's looking. We can say it's looking very healthy. Is looking very healthy. There we go. And then otherwise, if it's less than 25, we'll say his HP is waning. Otherwise, he appears normal. Okay, so basically any value between 25 and 50, all right, he'll appear normal. If he's above 50 health, he's looking healthy. So we can check that. Okay, by again using we can use a minus equals this time. So we can say player health minus equals. Okay, we'll say like 20 here. Okay, so if we go ahead and do that now, and we pause it and we run the program, okay. So my name's Richard. Would you like to begin your adventure? Yes. Adventure begins now. Kind of says prints my health. Um, it'll say I'm appearing normal, and I didn't put a space here, so I'll go ahead and do that. But it's printing this, right? So we can actually we probably should go ahead and print player health too, so we can see that player health icon or variable, I mean, and we'll go ahead and we'll print that here. And actually, I need to go to the beginning. I'll say adventurer name, and then we'll say health is, and then we'll add this, concatenate that at the end there, and we can write that line. And we can do that for each one of these cases so we can see how it's essentially running depending on the health variables. So um, basically, if we ran that, I believe the number should have been 65 we got to. It subtracted 20 from that, so then we're going to have 40, the player health be 45, the value of that variable there. And so this will run because it's 45, right? So if I just subtracted you know, 5, then this statement should run. Okay, so if we go ahead and check that now, health is 60, and it says, you can see I'm looking very healthy, right? Because it just subtracted the 5 here, and we see the value is now 60. So the this statement ran, right? Because the player health was greater than 50. So if it's less than 25, right, this will run. So we need to check that, make sure that's working. So we'll say we'll subtract 40, right? Um, and then it's less than or equal to. So it should equal 25, and this should run. So let's go ahead and check that. All right, we see 65. It's going to subtract, all right, subtract 40. And you can see here that this statement ran. So my health is waning, right? Because I'm under um, under 20. I'm right at 25, right? That's the player's health is right at 25, right? You can see that there. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this again here. We'll go back to the PowerPoint here. Next, we'll be talking about switch statements. So the format for a switch statement is this kind of expression here. So you'll have the switch keyword and then a value. And the value is essentially a key, more or less, that will go to the specified case in the statement below. So um, for example, if this says switch and we have the value, and let's say the value is like a selection, like an area selection. So we say forest. Um, it will go to this same value down here if this value equates to forest. Um, so if you look in the flow diagram here, essentially it just is going over how it will go to the main from the main method. It will then go into the switch statement. It will evaluate the expression, which in this case, would be something like forest. It would go to the first case. It would run that block of code, okay, it would then break out of the statement using the break keyword, and then continue on essentially with the program, okay? And if none of the expressions, okay, are indicated in the cases, it'll go to the default case, which will then break out of the statement and then continue on with the program. So maybe a little bit of a confusing kind of explanation there, but when you see it, you'll understand a little bit better. So essentially, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to present the user with a couple options. They'll type in their location choice, okay, and then from there, uh, we'll go ahead and set up the switch statement so that it will evaluate the location choice, which is a string, okay, a string type variable, so essentially text, and then each case, okay, will be associated with some text that we indicate we want the user to enter, and then it will run that code there. So in practice, let's go back to the um, program here, and we'll kind of see it in practice. So we'll go ahead and one second here. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and um, after kind of the status piece, the player's health status, we can go ahead and then give the player, we'll print out some text here using console.writeline, and we'll say something like, you are presented with three paths. One which leads to an ominous forest. Another winds up a volcanic mountain. And one that descends into a dark cave. With a semicolon and the line there. And I'm gonna also kind of teach you another kind of thing here, a little nice trick. So when you're typing this text here, a formatting a break character, we call this a break character, but it's a way to format the text on the console. It's \n, and what that essentially is going to do is it will allow that it will basically knock the text down to the next line. Kind of similar like console, essentially what console write line does, right? It writes the text like every time you do console write line, it's going to write the text on another line. But this sentence is pretty long, and so I add this basically break character. It's kind of essentially a return. Um, uh, I add that in there so that it will break it to the other line, to the next line, and so I can have this all in one console.writeLine statement. But this text will be bumped down to the next line there. So it doesn't like run like in the pro because otherwise it would like run off basically run off the program and then you wouldn't be able to see like this section of the text here. Um, but that's kind of a break character. It's just a kind of handy little piece. There's a lot of those types of characters for formatting text. We don't really have enough time to go over all of them, so um, I can bring up a another document that will or I can provide like a link to a couple of those. Regardless, we're then gonna prompt the user again, print some stuff to the screen and prompt them. Which path will you choose? Question mark. Please, and then we're gonna tell them exactly what we want to type, okay? Because we need this exact um, text to be able to set up the switch statement. So we'll say, please type forest mountain, or cave. And we will create a variable, a string type variable called location choice, and we'll set it equal to console.readLine again, so getting input from the user, okay? And I'm actually going to use that to lower again that we kind of talked about, because I just want all the text that they enter to be in a lowercase format, so that I don't have to write multiple. So I don't have to check the string and write in like a capital F for forest or all caps forest. It'll just take the whatever text they enter and format it to a lowercase word there. So then we will create the switch now. So you use the switch statement keyword here, and then you enter the location choice variable, the string, and that will be like the key for the switch there to tell the switch what uh, section of code to run. And so we use the case keyword to indicate a case, obviously, and then we'll enter forest, right? And then a uh, colon there after that, and then we can put the actual code below here. So I'm just gonna do a little texts, build the world up a little bit. You can really do whatever you'd like there, honestly, like in here. But I'll just, something like you'll travel deep into the dark forest, okay? Trees crowd around you as if surrounding and closing in on you. And then I'll do another one of those break characters, right? And I'll say as you as you travel deeper into the forest, you do not remember the way out. And then I'll do another console.writeLine here. This was not a pleasant walk in the woods. You wander lost, or excuse me, you wander lost for all eternity. So in this way, we're going to make this kind of like a choose your own adventure type kind of text game there. And this is kind of the you lose section of the choice there. So you'll notice that we're getting an error, right? So this is what an error looks like. It's the red twiggly lines under there if you haven't kind of seen that already. And we can't really run the program with errors. It will prevent us from doing so. So if we double click on this error, we can see control cannot fall out of switch from final case label. Okay. So, and then it says case forest. Okay. So it's a really fancy way of essentially saying that when it's kind of talking about control, this would be control. So the control of the program uh, gets determined by the location choice string, and uh, there is no way for us to essentially get out of this code. All right, so we go to forest, and then we print this text, and we wait for the user to enter a key, and then we can't get out of this section of code. So in order to do that, the other piece of the switch kind of case structure that you need is the break keyword. And break, okay, allows you to essentially break out of whatever section of code that you're in. And in this case, every case that we have, we need to have a break statement at the end of it. Otherwise, we won't be able to escape this section of the code that we're in. We're basically like stuck in here. So you'll see that again when I write case and I do mountain. I again I run into that same error, right? You'll see it down there. So, but if I put break right away, no longer an error because it allows us to break out of that statement. And so in this way, you can kind of take the user's input and then create choices or create essentially paths for the program to follow based on what the user's input is. Okay, so we'll do the next section here. And I'll say you scale the treacherous cliffs of the volcanic mountain where you discover a cave opening. Inside the cave, on the ground, you discover a ring. Just the one ring. And then we can, if you want to do kind of we'll kind of do like a quotation mark inside of this quotation mark, right? Single quotation mark. We'll say, "This ring rules!" Exclamation point, you exclaim. And I'll rule all other rings with this one. Perhaps in a reference to a famous book or movie you may have read or seen regarding a ring. So anyways, and then we can do console.readline to pause the execution of the program till the user enters another key. And we can kind of continue on with this. So I'm going to do another case here. And like I said, really you can get creative with the cases. Like you can put in what you want there. I'm just writing, what I had kind of set up my program to kind of do. So console.writeLine again. And I'm just going to copy, honestly, because I don't want to take too much more time, what I kind of had. So I'll just copy my text. You can pause the video or something if you want to just write what I wrote in terms of what we're printing to screen. But I encourage you to kind of do something creative there. Just put your own spin on it. And you'll see I get errors, and that's because I had two quotation marks, so you just want the one. And then we have break. So the last piece of the case of the switch statement structure, right, in addition to these cases, is we need what's called a default keyword or default, which will indicate a default case. Okay, and that is because we need something. We need essentially a default situation where if whatever the key is that's being used up here isn't indicated in the list of case statements, okay, it will default to this statement. So essentially, if none of this, none of these location choices are what the user, if the user enters something that isn't in this list of location choices, so forest, mountain, or cave, it will default to this statement here. So we'll say console.writeLine. And actually, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this up here, all right, like so, and then prompt them again to enter their location choice. Um, and we can go ahead and we'll get that information there, and that way it should bump back up there, and re-go through the process again. Okay, so um, that's a switch statement. It's very similar to an if else, honestly, which we talked about it just before. But it's really just a bunch of, if you have like a lot of cases that are based off of like one kind of selector uh, variable, it's a better structure to use as opposed to an if else. All right, guys, that'll do it for session 3 here. Good work today. Tomorrow we will be, or in the next session, I should say, we'll be going over loops more in detail. Have a good rest of your day.